The sky burned red as the alien warships descended, their engines roaring like thunder. The ground shook violently, and the air smelled of smoke and ash. In the middle of the chaos, a lone human soldier stood tall, his armor cracked and bloodied. His name didn't matter. His story did. He was the last of his squad, the last line of defense for what remained of humanity. Around him, the ruins of a once great city stretched as far as the eye could see. Buildings were reduced to rubble, and the streets were littered with the remnants of a civilization that had fought bravely but was now on the brink of extinction. The soldier gripped his rifle tightly, his hands trembling but his resolve unshaken. He had seen too much, too many friends fallen, too many lives lost. But he couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. A shadow loomed overhead. One of the alien drones, sleek and deadly, hovered above him. Its red eye scanned the area, searching for any sign of life. The soldier held his breath, pressing himself against a broken wall. He knew he couldn't fight it head-on. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted. But he had one thing the aliens didn't: the will to survive. The drone moved closer, its metallic hum growing louder. The soldier's heart pounded in his chest. He knew this could be the end. But just as the drone was about to spot him, a loud explosion echoed in the distance. The drone turned its attention toward the sound, giving the soldier a split second to act. He didn't hesitate. With a burst of energy, he sprinted across the open ground, dodging debris and leaping over fallen structures. His lungs burned, and his legs felt like they might give out, but he kept going. He had to. As he ran, he caught a glimpse of something in the distance, a faint glow coming from beneath the rubble. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The light pulsed gently, as if calling to him. Curiosity and hope surged within him. Could this be the key to turning the tide? Could this be humanity's last hope? But before he could reach it, a massive alien creature emerged from the shadows, blocking his path. It was taller than any building, with armor that shimmered like liquid metal. Its eyes glowed with a cold, merciless light. The soldier froze, his rifle raised but his hands shaking. He knew he couldn't win this fight. But he also knew he couldn't back down. The creature roared, a sound so deep it shook the ground. The soldier tightened his grip on his weapon, his mind racing. He had no plan, no backup, no way out. But he had something the aliens could never understand: the unbreakable spirit of a human. As the creature charged toward him, the soldier did the only thing he could. He stood his ground, ready to face the impossible. Because that's what humans did. They fought. They endured. They survived. And in that moment, as the creature closed in, the soldier made a decision. He would not go down without a fight. He would not let humanity's story end here. Because humans were unstoppable. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Earth was alive, vibrant, bustling, and full of hope. Cities stretched across continents, their lights shining like stars at night. People lived, loved, and dreamed of a future filled with possibilities. But all of that changed the day the aliens came. It started with a signal. Scientists detected a strange transmission from deep space. At first, they thought it was a mistake, a glitch in their equipment. But as the days passed, the signal grew stronger. It was a message, but not one of peace. It was a warning. The aliens arrived without warning. Their ships descended from the sky, massive and terrifying. They didn't come to talk. They came to conquer. Within hours, entire cities were reduced to ash. Governments fell, armies were crushed, and millions of lives were lost. Humanity fought back, but it wasn't enough. The aliens were too advanced, too powerful. In the midst of the chaos, ordinary people tried to survive. Families huddled together in basements, hoping to avoid the alien patrols. Parents whispered stories to their children, promising them that everything would be okay. But deep down, they knew the truth: Earth was dying. One such family was hiding in the ruins of what was once a bustling neighborhood. A father, a mother, and their young son. They had been on the run for weeks, moving from one hiding place to another. The father, a former engineer, had managed to keep them alive so far. But he knew their luck wouldn't last forever. "We need to keep moving," the father whispered, peeking out through a crack in the wall. The streets outside were eerily quiet, but he knew better than to trust the silence. The aliens were out there, hunting for survivors. The mother nodded, holding their son close. The boy was too young to understand what was happening, but he could feel the fear in the air. He clung to his mother, his small hands trembling. "Where will we go?" the mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The father didn't have an answer. Everywhere they went, death followed. But they couldn't stay here. The aliens would find them eventually. They had to keep moving, keep fighting, even if it seemed hopeless. As they prepared to leave, a loud noise echoed in the distance. The ground shook, and the walls of their hiding place trembled. The father's heart sank. He knew what that sound meant. The aliens were coming. "Stay close to me," he said, gripping his son's hand tightly. The family moved quickly, staying low and sticking to the shadows. But no matter how careful they were, they couldn't escape the inevitable. A group of alien drones appeared in the distance, their red eyes scanning the area. The family froze, their hearts pounding. The father knew they couldn't outrun them. They had to hide. He spotted a nearby building, its entrance partially collapsed. It was risky, but it was their only chance. He motioned for his family to follow him, and they slipped inside just as the drones passed by. The building was dark and filled with debris. The air was thick with dust, making it hard to breathe. But it was safe, for now. The family huddled together in a corner, trying to stay quiet. As they waited, the father thought about everything they had lost. Their home, their friends, their way of life. But most of all, he thought about the future. What kind of world would his son grow up in? Would there even be a world left? The mother reached out and took his hand, her eyes filled with tears. "We'll make it through this," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "We have to." The father nodded, but deep down, he wasn't so sure. The aliens were too powerful, too relentless. How could humanity survive against such a force? But then he remembered something, a story he had heard from a fellow survivor. There was a rumor about an ancient artifact, something buried deep underground. It was said to hold the key to defeating the aliens. At the time, he had dismissed it as a myth. But now, he wasn't so sure. As the family sat in the darkness, the father made a decision. They couldn't keep running. They had to fight back. And if the artifact was real, it might be their only hope. The father's decision was made. They couldn't keep running, hiding, and hoping for a miracle. If there was even a chance the artifact was real, they had to find it. But first, they needed information. The family stayed hidden in the ruined building until nightfall. The alien drones were less active in the dark, their glowing red eyes easier to spot against the black sky. When the coast seemed clear, the father led his family out into the open. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sound the distant hum of alien ships. The father moved cautiously, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. His wife followed close behind, holding their son's hand tightly. The boy was quiet, his wide eyes taking in the destruction around him. They made their way to an old subway station, its entrance partially collapsed. The father had heard rumors that survivors were gathering underground, sharing information and resources. If anyone knew about the artifact, it would be them. The station was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of mildew. The family descended the broken escalator, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. As they reached the platform, they saw a faint light in the distance. Voices murmured, low and cautious. A group of survivors huddled together, their faces gaunt and tired. They looked up as the family approached, their eyes wary but not hostile. The father stepped forward, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "We're looking for information," he said, his voice steady. "We heard there's something, an artifact, that could help us fight back." The survivors exchanged glances. One of them, an older man with a scar across his face, stepped forward. "You're talking about the beacon," he said. "It's not just a rumor. It's real." The father's heart raced. "Where is it?" The older man hesitated, then sighed. "It's buried deep underground, in a facility near the old research lab. But getting there won't be easy. The aliens have that area locked down." The father nodded, his mind racing. It was a dangerous plan, but it was their only hope. "We have to try," he said. "If the beacon can really help us, it's worth the risk." The older man studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll take you to someone who can help. But you need to understand, this isn't just about finding the beacon. It's about surviving long enough to use it." The family followed the older man through the tunnels, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. They passed other survivors, some injured, some barely clinging to life. The sight filled the father with a mix of sadness and determination. They couldn't give up. Not now. Finally, they reached a small room where a woman was hunched over a table, studying a map. She looked up as they entered, her sharp eyes taking in the family. "This is the one I told you about," the older man said. "He's looking for the beacon." The woman nodded, her expression serious. "You know the risks?" she asked the father. "I do," he replied. "But we don't have a choice." The woman studied him for a moment, then gestured to the map. "The facility is here," she said, pointing to a spot near the edge of the city. "But the area is heavily guarded. You'll need to move quickly and quietly." She handed him a small device. "This will help you navigate the tunnels. But once you're above ground, you're on your own." The father took the device, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at his wife and son, their faces filled with fear but also determination. They were in this together. "Thank you," he said to the woman. "We'll find the beacon. We have to." As they prepared to leave, the woman placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good luck," she said. "If you succeed, you might just save us all." The tunnels were a maze of darkness and danger. The father led the way, the small navigation device glowing faintly in his hand. His wife and son followed close behind, their footsteps soft but steady. The air was thick with tension, every sound making them freeze in fear. They had been walking for hours, the map guiding them through the labyrinth of underground passages. The device beeped softly, indicating they were getting closer to the surface. But with every step, the father's anxiety grew. He knew the hardest part was yet to come. As they approached a narrow staircase leading upward, the father stopped and turned to his family. "Once we're above ground, we need to move quickly," he whispered. "Stay close to me, no matter what." His wife nodded, her face pale but determined. Their son clung to her hand, his small frame trembling. The father crouched down and looked into his son's eyes. "You're brave," he said softly. "Braver than I ever was at your age. We're going to make it through this, okay?" The boy nodded, though his eyes were filled with fear. The father gave him a reassuring smile, then stood and took a deep breath. It was time. They climbed the staircase, the faint light of the moon filtering through the cracks above. As they reached the surface, the father peeked out cautiously. The area was eerily quiet, the ruins of the city bathed in an unnatural glow from the alien ships overhead. The facility was just a few blocks away, but it might as well have been miles. The streets were littered with debris, and alien patrols roamed the area. The father knew they had to move fast. "Stay low," he whispered, leading his family into the shadows. They moved from cover to cover, their hearts pounding with every step. The sound of distant footsteps made them freeze, but the patrol passed without noticing them. They were almost there. The facility loomed ahead, its entrance partially collapsed but still accessible. The father felt a surge of hope. They were going to make it. But just as they reached the entrance, a loud noise echoed behind them. The father turned, his heart sinking. A group of alien drones had spotted them, their red eyes glowing in the darkness. "Run!" the father shouted, pushing his family toward the facility. They sprinted inside, the drones close behind. The father grabbed a piece of debris and barricaded the door, but he knew it wouldn't hold for long. "We need to find the beacon," he said, his voice urgent. "Now!" The facility was dark and filled with strange machinery. The father used the navigation device to guide them, its faint light leading the way. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Finally, they reached a large chamber. In the center was a strange, glowing object, a massive crystal pulsating with energy. The beacon. The father approached it cautiously, his heart racing. This was it. This was their hope. But as he reached out to touch it, a loud crash echoed behind them. The drones had broken through the barricade. "Take the boy and hide," the father shouted to his wife. She hesitated, tears in her eyes, but nodded and pulled their son into the shadows. The father turned to face the drones, his hands trembling but his resolve unshaken. He knew what he had to do. He grabbed a piece of metal from the floor and stood in front of the beacon, ready to defend it with his life. The drones entered the chamber, their red eyes locking onto him. The father took a deep breath, his mind filled with thoughts of his family. He couldn't let them down. Not now. As the drones charged, the father fought with everything he had. He swung the metal bar, smashing one of the drones, but there were too many. They surrounded him, their weapons glowing as they prepared to strike. But just as they were about to attack, the beacon began to glow brighter. The father felt a surge of energy, a warmth spreading through his body. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing: the beacon had activated. The drones hesitated, their systems flickering. The father seized the moment, smashing another drone and creating an opening. He turned to his family, his voice filled with urgency. "Go! Get out of here!" His wife shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Not without you." The father looked at her, his heart breaking. "You have to," he said. "For our son. Please." She hesitated, then nodded, pulling their son toward the exit. The boy looked back, his eyes filled with fear and confusion. "Dad," he cried. The father smiled, his voice soft but firm. "I love you. Always remember that." As his family disappeared into the shadows, the father turned back to the drones. The beacon's glow was almost blinding now, its energy filling the chamber. He knew what he had to do. With a final, determined breath, he reached out and touched the beacon. The energy surged through him, a blinding light enveloping the chamber. The drones were destroyed in an instant, their systems overloaded. But the father knew the cost. He could feel the energy consuming him, his body growing weaker with every second. He had sacrificed himself to save his family, to save humanity. As the light faded, the father collapsed to the ground, his vision blurring. The last thing he saw was the beacon, its glow steady and strong. He smiled, knowing he had done what he had to do. The beacon's light spread across the city, its energy pulsing like a heartbeat. The alien ships overhead faltered, their systems disrupted by the sudden surge of power. For the first time in months, the skies were silent. In the shadows of the ruined facility, the mother and son watched in awe as the beacon's glow illuminated the darkness. The boy clung to his mother, his small hands trembling. "Is Dad," he began, but his voice trailed off. The mother hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "He saved us," she whispered. "He saved all of us." But there was no time to grieve. The beacon's activation had given humanity a chance, but it was up to them to seize it. The mother knew what she had to do. She had to honor her husband's sacrifice by ensuring the beacon's power was used to fight back. She took her son's hand and led him out of the facility. The streets were eerily quiet, the alien patrols nowhere to be seen. The beacon's energy had disrupted their systems, buying humanity precious time. As they made their way back to the underground tunnels, they encountered other survivors. People emerged from hiding, their faces filled with hope and confusion. The mother stepped forward, her voice strong despite her grief. "The beacon is active," she said. "It's our chance to fight back. But we need to work together." The survivors listened, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. They had lost so much, but the beacon's light had reignited their hope. One by one, they began to rally around the mother, ready to join the fight. Word spread quickly. Survivors from across the city began to gather, their numbers growing by the hour. The mother became a leader, her strength and resolve inspiring those around her. She knew she wasn't a soldier or a strategist, but she had something even more powerful, the will to protect her son and the future of humanity. With the help of the older man and the woman from the tunnels, they began to organize. The beacon's energy had given them access to alien technology, and they worked tirelessly to understand it. They scavenged weapons, repaired equipment, and prepared for the battles to come. The boy watched it all, his young mind struggling to process everything that had happened. He missed his father terribly, but he knew his dad's sacrifice had given them a chance. He wanted to help, to be brave like his father. One day, as the survivors were preparing for their next move, the boy approached his mother. "I want to help," he said, his voice small but determined. The mother knelt down and looked into his eyes. "You already are," she said softly. "Your dad would be so proud of you." The boy nodded, his eyes filled with a quiet strength. He might have been young, but he understood the stakes. He was part of this fight, just like everyone else. As the days passed, the resistance grew stronger. They launched small attacks on alien patrols, testing their newfound strength. Each victory, no matter how small, gave them more confidence. They were no longer just survivors, they were fighters. But the mother knew the aliens wouldn't stay dormant forever. The beacon's energy had disrupted their systems, but it was only a matter of time before they adapted. Humanity needed a plan, and they needed it fast. One night, as the resistance gathered to discuss their next move, the woman from the tunnels stepped forward. "We've intercepted alien communications," she said. "They're planning a massive counterattack. If we don't strike first, we'll lose everything." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The mother stood, her voice steady. "Then we strike first," she said. "We use the beacon's power to take the fight to them. For our families. For our future." The survivors cheered, their voices filled with determination. They were ready to fight, ready to reclaim their world. The mother looked at her son, his small face filled with hope. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they had something the aliens could never understand, the unbreakable spirit of humanity. The resistance was ready. After weeks of preparation, they had gathered their forces and devised a plan. The beacon's energy had given them access to alien technology, and they had used it to create weapons and defenses. Now, it was time to strike. The mother stood at the center of the command room, her eyes scanning the map of the city. The survivors around her were tense but determined. They knew the stakes. If this mission failed, humanity might not get another chance. We hit them here, she said, pointing to a location on the map. It was an alien supply depot, a critical hub for their operations. If we can take it out, we'll cripple their ability to fight back. The older man nodded. But it's heavily guarded. We'll need to move quickly and hit them hard. The woman from the tunnels stepped forward. We've rigged some of their own weapons to work against them. It won't be easy, but it's our best shot. The mother looked around the room, her gaze settling on her son. He was standing quietly in the corner, his small face filled with determination. She knew he wanted to help, but she couldn't let him risk his life. Not yet. Stay here, she said to him softly. We'll be back soon. The boy nodded, though his eyes were filled with worry. Be careful, he whispered. The mother smiled and kissed his forehead. I will. As the resistance moved out, the city felt eerily quiet. The beacon's energy still pulsed in the distance, its light a constant reminder of their hope. The survivors moved in small groups, sticking to the shadows and avoiding patrols. When they reached the supply depot, the mother gave the signal. The attack began. Explosions rocked the area as the resistance unleashed their weapons. Alien drones scrambled to respond, but the humans were ready. They fought with everything they had, their determination unshakable. The mother led the charge, her heart pounding but her resolve steady. She thought of her husband, of his sacrifice, and it gave her strength. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her son, for their future. The battle was intense, the air filled with the sounds of gunfire and screams. The aliens fought back fiercely, but the resistance was relentless. They used the alien weapons against them, their tactics clever and unpredictable. As the fight raged on, the mother spotted something in the distance, a massive alien walker, its towering frame looming over the battlefield. It was heading straight for them, its weapons primed to destroy everything in its path. We need to take that thing out, she shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. The older man nodded. I'll lead a team to distract it. You focus on the depot. The mother hesitated, but she knew he was right. Be careful, she said. The older man grinned. Always. As he and his team moved to intercept the walker, the mother turned her attention back to the depot. She rallied her group, and together they pushed forward, their weapons blazing. The fight was brutal, but slowly, the resistance began to gain the upper hand. The aliens were powerful, but they weren't prepared for the sheer determination of the humans. One by one, their defenses fell. Finally, the mother reached the heart of the depot. She planted explosives at its core, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. Fall back, she shouted as she activated the timer. The resistance retreated, their hearts pounding as they ran for cover. The explosives detonated with a deafening roar, the depot collapsing in a massive explosion. The shockwave knocked the mother off her feet, but she quickly scrambled up, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The walker was still standing, but it was damaged. The older man and his team had done their job. With a final, desperate effort, the resistance focused their fire on the walker, and it finally fell, crashing to the ground in a heap of metal and flames. The battlefield fell silent, the survivors breathing heavily as they realized what they had done. They had won. The mother looked around, her heart swelling with pride. They had struck a major blow against the aliens, and for the first time, it felt like they had a real chance. But as the survivors began to celebrate, a strange sound echoed in the distance. It was unlike anything they had heard before, a deep, ominous hum that sent chills down their spines. The mother's smile faded as she turned toward the sound. "What is that?" she whispered. The ominous hum grew louder, vibrating through the air like a warning. The resistance fighters froze, their celebrations cut short as they turned toward the sound. The mother's heart raced, her mind racing to understand what was happening. "Everyone, take cover," she shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. The survivors scrambled, their weapons raised as they prepared for the unknown. From the horizon, a massive alien ship emerged, its size dwarfing anything they had seen before. It moved slowly, its dark surface glinting in the light of the beacon. The hum grew deafening, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The mother's mind raced. This wasn't just another attack. Something was different. The ship didn't fire on them or deploy drones. It simply hovered, as if waiting. "What are they doing?" the older man asked, his voice tense. Before anyone could answer, a beam of light shot down from the ship, illuminating a spot in the distance. The survivors watched in stunned silence as a figure emerged from the light, an alien, but unlike any they had seen before. This alien was taller, its armor more intricate, and its presence commanding. It didn't attack. Instead, it raised a hand, as if signaling for peace. The mother hesitated, her instincts torn between fear and curiosity. "Stay here," she said to the others. "I'm going to see what it wants." "Are you crazy?" the older man exclaimed. "It could be a trap." "Maybe," she replied. "But if they wanted to kill us, they would have done it by now." Cautiously, she stepped forward, her weapon lowered but ready. The alien watched her approach, its glowing eyes unreadable. When she was close enough, it spoke, its voice deep and resonant, translated through a device on its armor. "We do not wish to fight," it said. The mother stared, her mind struggling to process the words. "Then why are you here?" she asked, her voice steady despite her fear. The alien paused, as if choosing its words carefully. "We are not your enemy. We are fleeing from a greater threat, one that will come for you as well." The mother's heart sank. "What are you talking about?" The alien turned, gesturing toward the massive ship. "Our world was destroyed by a force beyond comprehension. We came here seeking refuge, but we were wrong to take your world by force. We were desperate, but that does not excuse our actions." The mother's mind raced. All this time, they had thought the aliens were conquerors. But now, it seemed they were refugees, running from something far worse. "What is this threat?" she asked, her voice trembling. The alien's gaze was heavy with sorrow. "They are called the Devourers. They consume worlds, leaving nothing but ash. They are coming, and when they arrive, your world will fall unless we unite." The mother felt a chill run down her spine. She looked back at the resistance fighters, their faces filled with confusion and fear. She knew what she had to do. "If what you're saying is true," she said, turning back to the alien, "then we need to work together. But how do we know we can trust you?" The alien lowered its head. "We have no reason to deceive you. Our survival depends on yours. We will share our technology, our knowledge, everything we have. But we must act quickly." The mother took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was a lot to process, but she knew they didn't have time to hesitate. "We'll need to discuss this with the others," she said. "But if you're serious about helping us, we'll listen." The alien nodded. "Time is short. We will wait for your decision." As the alien retreated into the beam of light, the mother returned to the resistance fighters. They gathered around her, their faces filled with questions. "What did it say?" the older man asked. The mother took a deep breath, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "It's not over. The aliens, they're not our real enemy. There's something worse coming, and if we don't work together, we're all going to die." The survivors stared at her, their faces pale. The boy stepped forward, his small voice breaking the silence. "What do we do, Mom?" She looked at him, her heart aching. "We do what we've always done. We fight. But this time, we're not fighting alone." The resistance gathered in the command room, the air thick with tension. The mother stood at the front, her face grim as she addressed the group. Behind her, a holographic image of the alien ship hovered, a constant reminder of the choice they had to make. "We've all been through hell," she began, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "We've lost loved ones, our homes, our way of life. And now, we're being asked to trust the very beings who caused all of this. I know how hard that is. But if what they're saying is true, we don't have a choice." The room erupted into murmurs, the survivors exchanging uneasy glances. The older man stepped forward, his voice filled with anger. "You can't be serious. These monsters destroyed our world, and now you want us to work with them?" The mother held up a hand, silencing the room. "I'm not saying it's easy. But if there's a greater threat out there, one that could wipe us all out, we need to think about survival. Not just for us, but for our children." She looked at her son, who was sitting quietly in the corner. His small face was filled with fear, but also a quiet strength. He nodded slightly, as if to encourage her. The woman from the tunnels stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "I don't trust them either. But if they're willing to share their technology, it could give us a fighting chance. We can't let our anger blind us to the bigger picture." The older man shook his head, his fists clenched. "And what if it's a trick? What if they're just trying to finish us off?" The mother sighed, her heart heavy. "I don't know," she admitted. "But if we don't take this chance, we might not get another. We have to decide, and we have to decide now." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The survivors looked at each other, their faces filled with doubt and fear. Finally, one by one, they began to nod. "We'll follow your lead," the older man said reluctantly. "But if this goes wrong, it's on you." The mother nodded, her resolve steady. "I understand." She turned to the woman from the tunnels. "Contact the aliens. Tell them we're willing to talk." As the woman worked to establish communication, the mother walked over to her son. She knelt down, her eyes filled with love and determination. "This isn't going to be easy," she said softly. "But we'll get through it. Together." The boy nodded, his small hand gripping hers. "I'm scared," he whispered. "So am I," she admitted. "But being scared doesn't mean we're weak. It means we're human." A few moments later, the holographic image of the alien leader appeared in the room. Its glowing eyes scanned the group, its voice calm but urgent. "Have you made your decision?" The mother stepped forward, her voice strong. "We'll work with you. But if you betray us, we'll fight back with everything we have." The alien nodded. "We understand. Time is short. The devourers will arrive soon, and we must prepare." The mother turned to the resistance fighters. "We have a lot of work to do. Let's get started." The days that followed were a blur of activity. Humanity and the aliens worked side by side, their uneasy alliance fueled by the urgency of the looming threat. The beacon's energy was harnessed to power new defenses, and alien technology was integrated into human weapons. Despite their differences, both sides understood the stakes. If they failed, there would be no second chance. The mother stood at the center of it all, her leadership unshakable. She had become a symbol of hope, not just for the resistance, but for the aliens as well. Her son was always by her side, his quiet strength a reminder of what they were fighting for. As the final preparations were made, the alien leader approached her. "The devourers are close," it said, its voice grave. "We must be ready." The mother nodded, her heart pounding. "We will be." The sky darkened as the devourers' fleet arrived, their ships massive and terrifying. They moved like a swarm, their intent clear, to consume everything in their path. The resistance and their alien allies stood ready, their defenses primed and their weapons loaded. The battle began with a deafening roar. The devourers unleashed their full power, their weapons tearing through the defenses. The resistance fought back with everything they had, their determination unyielding. The mother led the charge, her voice rallying the fighters as they pushed forward. The boy stayed in the command center, his small hands gripping the controls of a drone. He had insisted on helping, and his mother had reluctantly agreed. As he guided the drone through the battlefield, he spotted a weakness in the Devourer's formation. "Mom," he shouted over the comms. "If we hit them here, we can break their line." The mother hesitated, her heart aching at the thought of her son being in danger. But she knew he was right. "Do it," she said, her voice filled with pride. The boy guided the drone into position, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. With a deep breath, he activated the explosives, and a massive explosion rocked the battlefield. The Devourer's line broke, their ship scattering in disarray. The resistance seized the opportunity, pushing forward with renewed strength. The aliens fought alongside them, their technology and knowledge proving invaluable. Together, they began to turn the tide. But the Devourers were relentless. As the battle raged on, the mother found herself face to face with one of their leaders, a towering, monstrous figure that seemed to radiate darkness. It raised its weapon, ready to strike. Before it could attack, the alien leader stepped in, its body shielding the mother. The Devourer's weapon struck, and the alien leader fell, its armor shattered. "No," the mother cried, her heart breaking. She knelt beside the alien leader, its glowing eyes dimming. "You must finish this," it said, its voice weak but determined. "For all of us." The mother nodded, her tears falling as she stood. She raised her weapon, her resolve unshakable. With a fierce cry, she charged at the Devourer leader, her attacks precise and relentless. The creature faltered, its strength fading as the mother struck the final blow. The battlefield fell silent as the Devourer leader collapsed. The remaining ships began to retreat, their swarms scattering into the void. The Resistance and their alien allies stood victorious, their cheers echoing across the ruined city. The mother looked around, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow. They had won, but the cost had been great. She walked over to her son, pulling him into a tight embrace. "We did it," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. The boy nodded, his small face filled with awe. "We did it together." As the survivors began to rebuild, the mother stood at the edge of the city, looking out at the horizon. The beacon's light still glowed in the distance, a symbol of hope and resilience. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they had proven that even in the face of impossible odds, humanity could endure. Conclusion and life lesson. The story ends with a powerful message: even in the darkest times, hope and unity can light the way. Humanity's strength lies not in its power, but in its ability to come together, to forgive, and to fight for a better future.